Every 1.5 seconds, someone in the US experiences a major depressive episode, affecting about 10% of the population, or roughly 21 million people annually. So, what exactly is depression? Well, according to Mayo Clinic, depression is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest, also called major depressive disorder or clinical depression. It affects how you feel, think, and behave, and can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems. You may have trouble doing normal day to day activities, and sometimes you may feel as if life isn't worth living. Depression in the US has nearly doubled in the past decade, and in 2020, due in part to the pandemic, almost tripled in a couple of months. Yet many cases go undocumented, as mental health has not been the forefront of our society until recently, especially among men. This actually reminds me of a quote from a show I used to watch growing up called Fairy Tale. The loneliest people are the kindest, the saddest people smile the brightest, the most damaged people are the wisest, all because they do not wish to see anyone suffer the way they did. That statement is definitely a generalization, as depression manifests itself in many different ways. Some people may become overly kind, others may completely close themselves off to the world. But for the most part, this rings true in society today, especially among men who are told to swallow their sorrows. Now, depression can present itself in anyone, including some known celebrities who have come forward about their battle with this mood disorder. Some examples include Dwayne The Rock Johnson, John Hamm, Kristen Bell, Sheryl Crow, and sadly, Robin Williams, who is sorely missed. Clearly, this transcends celebrities, as you may know someone battling depression, yet shows no to minimal signs outwardly. Sadly, things that we sometimes take as abundant humor and kindness stems from a person deflecting the pain and emptiness they feel inside, creating a mask they show the world to hide the hurt beneath. I am sharing my story of my battle with depression and how I eventually conquered it with two goals in mind. First, to empower others to begin their mental health journey, and second, to educate on useful techniques to help combat depression. But to do that, we need to rewind the clock a bit. I remember growing up in a loving home, not perfect, but had parents that cared about me and wanted to see me thrive, always cheerful and happy, excited to go to Disney every weekend as we were that Florida family that had annual passes. And it was literally my mother's favorite place on earth, as cliche as that sounds. Fast forward through elementary school, and then in my seventh grade year, my family got hit with some pretty shit news. My mom had stage 4 lung cancer, and of course, at the time being 12, I was not informed of the severity of the diagnosis, but I understood cancer was not good. Almost a year and a half later, and I'm arguing with my mother about watching the movie Happy Feet. Yes, that's the one with the dancing penguins, yet little did I know this would be the last conversation we had. And the next morning, I witnessed her unexpected death. And in this moment, I felt immense loss. I'm not going to get into the semantics of grief, as I'm saving this experience for another video, but in summary, at that moment, I felt immense malice towards myself and the world. An argument was the last memory I had with her, and it was all my fault. I blame myself for that mistake and carried it with me everywhere. It bled into my friendships as it created great mistrust of other people. But even more than that, I broke the trust within myself. And with that trust broken, I began down a dark path of depression and anxiety, stemming from loathing myself. This may sound pretty normal in modern times, as many of us go through some trauma or trigger at a young age, but this turned my internal state into one of hatred and bitterness towards everything. I trust that the world we see around us reflects our internal state, as perception is reality. Think negatively with animosity toward yourself, the world will mirror that back to you. And that was the state I occupied. Literal war against the world. It's not like I thought the world was out to get me, but rather it was actively moving against my wishes. Not until over a decade did I understand the world is inherently benign. Marching through high school, I kept most people at arm's length with little desire to befriend new people and scooting by socially. Little did I know that I was keeping myself imprisoned with negative thoughts and self torment. I truly believed a part of me perpetuated hell on earth as recompense for my self proclaimed sins of arguing with my mother. Additionally, I blame myself partially for her passing. And then I went to college. I wanted to get as far away from the memories that haunted me, so I moved to Nashville, Tennessee. Running did not help, but it didn't make anything worse, just indifferent. I was stuck in this purgatorial state to where I was unable to forgive myself and allow love into my heart again. Instead of having the tough conversation and introspecting, I deferred to vices to alleviate the pain and forget about my depression. It's funny how a few beers and some raucous acquaintances can cheer you up. Eventually, the booze and fun didn't even numb the pain anymore. It just made me more aware of it. And that's when I met my first real friend who showed me the brighter side of life. Living by the principle of reaching outside of your comfort zone to let yourself heal while having new experiences, but also taking the time to forgive yourself. And then in my senior year, I dropped a large dose of hallucinogenics, which began the process of self acceptance and eventually leading to my depression subsiding years later. On a side note, I want to be clear that this is not an endorsement of substances. It just happened. This experience was life changing for me, and I wish to share that with you. Now, let me set the stage. Imagine all subconscious and conscious thoughts taking form in the physical world. In short, you are literally facing your own mind. For me, this took the form of reliving the moment of my mother's death, but from an almost third party perspective. I could see and feel my younger self, every emotion he went through, yet something seemed different. It was playing out differently than how I remembered. My mom hugged me and told me everything is okay. It was like a weight finally lifted off my chest. It was as though I finally forgave a part of myself. And again, let me be clear, as I am not a doctor or in any way a pharmaceutical expert, so I'm not condoning the use of hallucinogens, just sharing my story. But damn, did that change my perspective for the better and brought closure to a decade old wound. Now, some of you may be wondering, is that how he conquered his self hate and depression? Absolutely not. That was just the initial push in the right direction. Now we had to get out of the cave of self sabotage. I still carried animosity towards myself, but it was dialed down drastically. Imagine turning an amp from an 11 to a 6. It was still present, but now I could learn to manage it. And that led me to my first session seeing a mental health counselor. And after about 2 years of biweekly sessions, I finally could tolerate my own presence. Now, I understand seeing a medical professional is not everyone's prerogative, or maybe you cannot afford one. But if you have the ability to see one, I highly recommend it, and here's why. First, it gives you someone to talk to that has a background in these sort of matters. Honestly, half the time I did not care what my shrink said, but the act of talking through my problems with a professional put a fresh perspective on a situation, allowing for a solution to be created. Ironically, it's difficult to find a solution to a problem when you're in the problem, but having the ability to step outside of it or having someone view it from the outside is significant. Second, you have someone who can hold you accountable to your emotions and thoughts, while also simultaneously teaching you how to separate yourself from them and viewing your thoughts and emotions objectively. Now, the good news is you do not need a shrink to get these benefits, just a close friend or family member willing to listen and talk out your problems with you. I still do this today when I have an issue that I can't really work through on my own. I will give my dad a call and have a conversation with him. However, choose someone you can be vulnerable with, as you are bringing your problems to them and not everyone wants to listen. After leaving therapy about 4 years ago, as I had the tools to address the depression, anxiety, and self hate, I began implementing them on a regular basis and created a few of my own. The two main methods I used from therapy are: first, controlled breathing. As you guess, it's just consciously regulating your breath, specifically when overwhelming emotions or thoughts occur, allowing you to remain centered. The second one involved questioning and separating myself from my thoughts or emotions, creating awareness of them. So, anytime I had a negative thought or emotion, I would process them objectively by asking three questions: why am I feeling this? Where does this stem from? Is this how I really feel? And if I did not have the energy to address that in that moment, I would table it for a later time. Beyond the therapy tools, I also use morning meditation and nightly journaling to be cognizant of my emotional and mental state, while simultaneously addressing any irregularities within my mood and why they are occurring. From this journey, I learned that self hate and depression never really stop. The negative thoughts never stop coming. However, the frequency of them can be stymied significantly, which allows for more positive self feedback to flow in. Funny, when you were chasing something as elusive as self love or conquering depression, maybe starting with acceptance is good enough. Eventually, you will notice the positive thoughts start to take over, and you have them often. Understand you are not going to love yourself and be happy all the time, but being able to recognize and be mindful of when you are slipping into negative, self deprecating thought processes is a huge win, because you can halt it in its tracks. Today, I have finally accepted myself, and the depression has subsided, as the positive outweighs the negative, and the negatives have no bearing on my state. That's how I conquered my depression, through relentless and consistent effort and understanding my mental and emotional state so I could better control it. Now, I challenge you to see what steps you can take to begin or continue your mental health journey, and I would love for you to leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button and give it a like, as that's truly appreciated. And to be notified of any future content, hit that notification bell, as I will be producing more videos like this in the future. Thanks for tuning in, and have an awesome day.